Yeah, I want to put this up here from Fox News saying the Senate War Powers resolution, it failed 47 to 53. John Fetterman, the lone Democrat to vote against it, while Senator Rand Paul was the lone Republican to support it. A live picture there on Capitol Hill here on this Wednesday evening. And this War Powers resolution gave lawmakers an opportunity to demand congressional approval before any further attack. They are carried out. The vote forced them to take a stand on the war shaping the fate of U.S. military members, countless other lives, and the future of the region. And obviously, we're getting into more about what's going on today. We heard President Trump. We heard the second briefing from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, also General Dan Kane, exactly of what is unfolding after launching that surprise attack against Iran on Saturday. Trump has scrambled to win support for a conflict that Americans of all political persuasions are wary of entering. But let's continue on. We're hearing support, though, from different people as well, including the former governor of Florida, Jeb Bush. He said here on social media, I recorded a special video message applauding Donald Trump's historic Operation Epic Fury and calling on all American leaders from both parties to unite behind a noble cause, freedom for the great people of Iran. All right, we're following this here on Live Now from Fox. Let's bring into the conversation right now Jeb Bush, also affiliated with United Against Nuclear Iran. We're going to be joined right now by CEO of that organization, also former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mark Wallace. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. Why is it important for you, and why do you feel this action in Iran was justified by the president?
First of all, thank you for having me on, and we appreciate the coverage of this very important issue and your thoughtful coverage of it. It's hard to find thoughtful coverage right now on a lot of this stuff. So look, we've been, at United Against Nuclear Iran, we've been in the business of trying to thwart Iran's nuclear program, its support for terrorism, and its destabilization of the region, and frankly, the oppression of its people for nearly 20 years now. We've used sanctions, we've tried a variety of different tools. Successive administrations have said the Iranians must stop their nuclear program, have tried to negotiate with the regime to come up with a deal that eliminates Iran as a threat to the region, to the United States, and to Israel. And President Trump did exactly what each president has done prior to him, but he did it a lot better. And I think the Trump Doctrine is beginning to form. The president said very clearly that he was ready to negotiate, sent his diplomats, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and said, let's come up with a solution that works, a real solution. I go back to the JCPOA in the mid-teens under President Obama, and I remember waiting, and I was hopeful. We worked with every president. We tried to be bipartisan. This used to be a bipartisan issue, even though I come out of Republican politics. And the first thing that happened after the JCPOA was world leaders in that region called me up, or I met with, and said, you know what? This doesn't cover ballistic missiles. Iran's going to continue to support terrorism. They're testing ballistic missiles, I think it was 8 days after entering into the JCPOA. President Trump said very clearly, let's have a deal, let's negotiate this, and Iran refused to negotiate in good faith. I think the Trump Doctrine is beginning to form. The Trump Doctrine, I think, can be summarized in a phrase, he means what he said. For once, America means what he said. And I think that that's been very, very clear. He wanted a diplomatic solution, but was not afraid to use American power to prevent a much more escalatory threat down the road. If Iran had double the ballistic missiles, more capable of ballistic missiles, or nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles, imagine the threat that Iran could have, that would have with us in the future. So his action was done to protect the United States, our allies in the region, from living underneath the threat of Iran's terrorism, its ballistic missile threat, and its a religious conviction to have a nuclear weapon.
And obviously what President Trump has said, taking out the Iranian supreme leader, the Ayatollah, it wasn't necessarily a part of the objective. That wasn't necessarily very clear, but they have clarified. Secretary of State Marco Rubio coming out saying it wasn't a part of it. Regime change was not the main focus of this. It was those ballistic missiles and also the Iranian Navy. But regime change is potentially underway there in Iran. We saw that with taking out the supreme leader and others around him. Do you believe regime change is the only way for change to happen in Iran?
Well, I always used to say, and I don't think it was, I think that the regime either had to change or the regime had to be changed. And if you have a regime that lived by death to America, death to Israel, and acted on it every day with the support of terrorism, with the pursuit of a ballistic missile program that threatened our allies and troops around the region, a proliferation of a drone program, the Shahed 136, that has killed American troops, killed or wounded the citizens of over 84 countries, is the drone of choice that Russia uses against Ukraine and is raining on Europe. Nobody should shed a tear for the Ayatollah's demise. This was a brutal man that was a brutally violent sponsor of terror and has the blood of Americans, Israelis, Arabs, and people of all faiths on his hands. So I think either the regime had to change, and President Trump gave them that option, and he said, if you don't change, there's going to be consequences. And for once, we have a president that is using American power in an appropriate manner to back up the diplomatic option, and also saying, look, we want to deal with Iran now before they have more ballistic missiles, before they have better ballistic missiles, before they have nuclear-tipped ballistic missiles. And you can see it. I mean, I know that it's a very, and I don't mean to sound critical of you because I think your coverage is great. I don't think that this is war breaking out across the region. You have seen some attacks where a few episodes of ballistic missiles and drones have gotten through to our allies. I think this is all predictable by our services. Is it tragic? Any loss of life, any attack is, but this is not a war yet.
And you mentioned that potentially this being not war, we're trying to kind of find the definition because Republicans in Congress are saying not necessarily war, but then President Trump uses the word war during that outcome. I want to ask you, what comes next? What comes the day after all of this? What is the U.S. exit strategy plan?
Well, it's funny. I do find it. I've been around politics and policy in this world for almost 3 decades now. And I will tell you, the war powers discussion happens. Whatever party controls the White House is criticized by the other party in Congress for failure to use, for Congress not going to Congress on any military action. So the Democrats use it against Republicans use it against Democrats, and we've seen it in every case as part of the partisan politics. But look, the real issue for us is Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. That used to be bipartisan. That used to be very, very clear. Both parties' presidents said Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. I think that means Iran can't have ballistic missiles because typically those are for wide area munitions, like a nuclear weapon. And look at the threat that is being actually acted upon with our allies in the region. Iran can't have a ballistic missile array, can't have drones that threaten America, its allies in the region. Remember, it was an Iranian Shahed 136 drone that killed American soldiers in Tower 22. Iran can't support its proxies. So I think the degradation of its military, degradation of its leadership that is based upon that, and hopefully having the Iranian people sorted out is a very good outcome for the United States of America, solely focused on American security, which ultimately, as Americans, that's what it should be about. Now, look, we all want the best for the Iranian people. They're great people. We want the best for the people of the region. But this was a real threat to American security, the security of our allies, and particularly Israel. And dealing with it now in the manner of the Trump Doctrine, either change or be changed, I think was the right action. And this is one of the reasons why we applauded President Trump. Hopefully, bipartisan consensus will continue to form. We used to always support when we have service members at risk in theater and offshore. We would always unite behind those actions and be concerned about our service members. It seems like we've lost our way in that area.
Secretary Hegseth noted that ballistic missiles, as you were noting, saying they're hunting some of those launchers. I also want to get into another component because the drones, the Shahed 136 drones, are so very crucial to this ongoing conflict. And I was kind of scrolling through your social media, and this came up from about a month ago as you were at the Munich Security Conference talking about this exact Shahed 36 drone, an Islamic Republic weapon of mass destruction. It's the true face of this Islamic Republic, potentially also causing challenges just based on the low trajectory, the slow nature of it. Does that concern you? We've lost 6 U.S. service members already to a potential drone attack in Kuwait. Is that drone a concern to you now in this ongoing, potentially wider conflict?
Well, you're talking to the CEO of an NGO and the man that is the only two Shahed 136s in private hands that we exfiltrated out of war zones. And if you went back farther in our social media feed, you'll see that we had that very same, another drone, Shahed 136, that we imported into the United States and did an event on Capitol Hill with Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, Ted Cruz, Brian Mast, the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and a variety of others. Do you know how many Democrats showed up to that event? Zero.
I not know.
Zero. And we were highlighting the threat that those drones perpetrated on America. They killed the troops at Tower 22. On Israel, they were launched against Israel. They were launched against the Saudis and the Emiratis. They were launched against the Jordanians. And they rained, 6,000 of them have rained on Ukraine and Europe. Maybe waking up to the fact that that's Iran aligning itself with Russia and others to perpetrate drone terror on all of us would have been the right effort. But you'll see, if you go back to that social media feed, that we showed the danger and the true face of that Shahed well before Munich and before that. And the thing that was very surprising at Munich, not to drift afield with you, is the Europeans were very concerned about Iran's supply of Shahed 136s to Russia because they threatened Europe and their ally Ukraine. Look, I'm a supporter of Ukraine. In full disclosure, I think that we should stand and support our Ukrainian friends. But it sure does ring hollow to me when the Europeans are running for the tall grass, not looking to support in any way the incredible danger that Iran presented to the United States, our allies, Israel, and the GCC, while certainly proclaiming that same threat in Europe against Ukraine. The hypocrisy of Europe on that point is incredible, in my opinion. I know they're very critical of the transatlantic alliance under President Trump, but any criticism certainly should fall at their feet with their failure to understand that drone.
Well, I'm glad I certainly asked about the Shahed drone, just based on your expertise, your insight into that on Capitol Hill.
I want to bring it to your show. We can put it on in studio, and you can do a program with the drone in your studio.
We might just have to do that, Ambassador. My last question before I let you go, because we heard Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, the first time they've held a White House briefing since Operation Epic Fury, saying boots on the ground, they're not a part of the plan of this operation so far. At what point potentially would they be? Would you envision it necessary for the United States to actually send American troops in?
You know, I think that the hangover, and I'm not criticizing anybody that feels the hangover from Iraq or Afghanistan. These are big challenges to our country and the source of enormous domestic debate. But the reality is the threat posed by Iran is very clearly being eliminated. But the threat to the United States and to our allies is being very clearly eliminated by the incredible prowess of our military, airstrikes, drone, and others, Navy, taking action to degrade their abilities in an incredible manner. And I don't understand the debate really on the boots on the ground. We have degraded Iran, and the number of strikes is becoming less and less each day as their capability is eroded. I don't see a circumstance why or otherwise, and I think the debate is politically charged and doesn't look at the reality of the contemporary circumstance with technology, the changing face of warfare, our abilities, our incredible supremacy in the air, our supremacy of technology, our supremacy in the military. I think it really is an unnecessary pretending of a political hangover from Iraq.
Yeah, we might be a long way from that. Obviously, people are kind of interested about it, and you heard the phrase boots on the ground. I just wanted to get your take on that. Ambassador, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Thank you for having me.